Okay, Unit 3 group quiz. Number 1. Remember that anytime you have like pluses or minuses within the parenthesis, like on number 2, you have to use your FOIL or box method. But on number 1, there's no pluses or minuses in here making multiple terms. Therefore, you just take that second power and distribute it through. Yes? Okay, so 3 squared makes what? 9. And then, it's okay, and then x squared, and then we'll get y to the negative 4th, because powers to powers we multiply. On the bottom, this is to the 3rd power. 2 to the 3rd power makes 8, and then you have x to the negative 3 and y to the 3rd. You can't move negative exponents up and down until you get rid of the whole exponent outside of the parenthesis. Unless the exponent outside of the parenthesis is a negative, then you would change the side first, right? Okay, so I had to move all these or distribute that 2 through before I can get rid of my negative exponent. So now, if we want to move our negative exponents, the y is going to go to the bottom, and these x's are going to go to the top. So I still have 9 and 8. There's 2 x's on top, but I'm bringing 3 more up, which means there's going to be how many x's? 5. Because when we're moving them up and down, we're just adding them. Powers to powers you multiply. Like here we multiply the exponents, but now when we're just shifting them up and down, you're combining them together. So it's like you have 2 x's on the top. Right now I have a negative 3 on the bottom. So when I move the 3 up with the 2 up, it makes 5. So with the y's, I'm going to end up with how many in the denominator? 7. Good. And that's my answer. I cannot reduce. Questions on number 1? What? Okay. Number 2. So like I told you, do you see how there's a plus in between that? Since there are 2 terms, that makes it a binomial, which means that we are going to, that we have to either FOIL or use our box method. Order of operations, you want to get rid of your exponents, right? Parentheses exponents first. So I'm going to multiply that out. So if I do the box method, we're going to have a 2 by 2 box. We get 3x and 5, 3x and a positive 5. We multiply here. I get 9x squared. 3x times 5 is 15x. 5 times 3x is 15x, and 5 times 5 is 25. If you have like terms, they'll be in the diagonal. Sometimes those terms won't be like, and you would just write it in descending order. So right now, what you need to not forget is that there is still an x in front. And when I combine these terms, I have 9x squared. 15 and 15 makes 30x, good, plus 25. Okay, and then your last step when you're multiplying is to distribute the x through to all those terms. And so we end up with 9x cubed plus 30x squared plus 25x. And there is nothing further I can do. That is my answer. Questions on number 2? Okay, number 3. What am I going to do on number 3? Your box method again. Very good. So what size box would I need for number 3? Good. 2 by 2 is correct. Yes, Amber? Right. In this case, it's not going to. So let's go ahead and write it out so we can talk about that. So I have 2x squared and a 5 and x and negative 5. The one thing you need to be super careful about on these is that you double check your signs. Okay? So we're going to multiply. 2x squared times x makes 2x to the 3rd power. X times 5 is 5x. Negative 5 times 2x squared is? Good. Negative 10x squared. And then negative 5 times 5 is? Perfect. Okay, if you look here, if you have like terms, they'll be in the diagonals. Okay, my diagonals are not like terms. X squared and x are not the same. Are there any like terms in this box? No. So all we do is write it in descending order. So we have 2x to the 3rd minus 10x squared plus 5x minus 25. Does anybody know why we didn't get like terms? The reason is see how this is x squared and this is an x? We normally get like terms when the front terms, see how this is a plain x and this is a plain x? They both are the same. Since this is an x squared and this is an x, it ends up not giving you like terms. Yes, Amber? You probably did something wrong then. They should, yes. Okay, any other questions on like 2 or 3 there? Okay, number 4. In order to simplify this, you just have to get rid of your negative exponents. When you're taking your tests, you never want to leave negative exponents. Okay? So, remember, a negative number is okay. A negative exponent is not okay. Is the 3 being raised to a negative exponent? No. The only thing that's being raised to a negative exponent is the x. Okay? And so we can put this over 1. This needs to change sides, but the negative 3 is okay. So that means my answer is negative 3 over x squared, because when I move the x to the negative 2 to the bottom, it changes to positive. There's nothing more I can do there. That is my answer. Questions? Okay, number 5 is asking us to factor. So on 2 and 3, they're asking us to multiply. Now they're asking us to factor. Whenever you factor, what's the first thing you should always check for?
GCF.
Very good. Is there a GCF?
Yes.
What is it?
4.
Okay. So whenever you have a GCF, that goes in front of your parenthesis. I'm dividing each of these terms by 4. I like to show my work because I usually don't make mistakes if I actually show my work. 16 divided by 4 makes 4, and then I have y squared. So far, so good? Then we want to check if we can factor further. Okay? So there's only 2 terms. You want to check if this is either a difference of squares or cubes. It looks like it's squares, but we need to write everything as a square. Can I write 4 as a square?
Yes.
2 squared. 2 squared and 4 are the same thing. Okay? And then how do I write when I factor this into the parentheses?
X minus 2y, and then x plus 2y.
Perfect. Okay, so you're just splitting apart your squares, and you get your x's and your 2y's. Keep them in the same spots. One has a minus, one has a plus. I cannot factor any further, but always double check that you can't. Okay, any questions on 5?
Did you really have to put the squares?
No. I just want to show you where I'm getting the 2's from. Okay, other questions on 5? Okay, number 6. Again, what do I always check for first?
GCF.
Is there a GCF on number 6?
Yes.
What is it? 2. So I'm going to do a 2, make my parenthesis. I divide each of these by 2. 8 divided by 2 is?
4.
So we have 4x squared minus, and 50 divided by 2 is
25.
25y squared. Good. Can 4 and 25 both be written as squares? 4 is 2 squared, and 25 is what?
5 squared.
Good. Okay, so we keep our 2 in front. This is a difference of squares, so what's going to be my first parenthesis?
2x minus 5y.
Good, 2x minus 5y, and then the other will be 2x
Plus 5.
plus 5y. And I can't factor either one of those further, so that is my answer. Okay, questions on this problem? Nope. Are we good? Yes? Okay. Okay, number 7. Again, it's asking us to factor. Anytime they ask us to factor, we always check for what first? Greatest common factor. Do these have anything in common where all 4 terms have the same thing in common?
No. You see?
These have C's, but then the last one doesn't, so C doesn't work. So they don't have anything in common that we can factor out of everything. So this, when we have 4 terms, we're grouping them. Pay attention because the sign that's in front of the 3C goes with this group, okay? What is your GCF of that first group? 7 what? C squared, because there's a C cubed and a C squared. So we're taking out 7C squared, which means I'm dividing each of these terms by 7C squared. And when I do that, what am I left with? C minus 4. Very good. Okay, in this group, what is my GCF? 3. Okay, that means I'm dividing each of these terms by 3, and what am I left with?
C minus 4.
C minus 4. These parentheses should be the same. If they aren't, you did something wrong and go back and fix it. Okay. Now remember that when these are the same, this is like basically I have two terms now. I have this term and this term. Okay? If there wasn't a minus sign, it's a plus, right? So now my GCF is C minus 4. So I am factoring out a C minus 4. I put that in front, which means I'm dividing each of these by C minus 4. These cancel, and what is left over for my second parenthesis?
7c squared plus 3.
7c squared plus 3. Can I factor either one of these further? No. That is my answer. Yes, Susanna?
Does it always have to go in front?
No. And you can write, you can write the two parentheses in either order. Okay? All right, again, number 8 says factor completely. What do we always check for first? GCF. Do these 4 terms have something in common? They each have a y, right? Do we all agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay, so a y is going to be written in front, and I divide each of these by y. And then what am I left with?
A cubed minus a squared plus c.
A squared c and then plus c. Good. Okay, so this y is pretty much done. We've factored that out. We don't have to think about it anymore. In fact, if you wanted to on your answer, you could go over here and write y, because that's going to be the first thing in front. Okay, so now what I'm worried about is these 4 terms. What do we end up doing with 4 terms?
Divide.
Good, you break them into 2 groups, right? So there's my first group, and remember that sign goes with my second group. Okay, within my first group, what is my GCF? A. Good. So I have A parenthesis, and I'm dividing each of these terms by A, and what am I left with?
How do you know when you have to break them like that?
When you have 4 terms. So within this parenthesis, I had 1, 2, 3, 4. Because pluses and minuses break up terms. Whenever you have 4 terms, you group them. Okay? So a to the third divided by a makes a squared minus an a divided by a makes 1. Okay, now the second group. If you notice, this minus is in the front and there's a plus here. But we want a minus in the middle. So I know I'm going to have to divide by a negative. Very good. And then what else do they have in common? C. So that means my GCF for this group is a negative C. Make my parenthesis. The C's cancel out, the negatives cancel out, and you're left with a squared. Here the C's cancel out, but a positive divided by a negative makes a negative. So I have minus 1. Do these parentheses match? Good, as they should. So that means that my GCF now is what? A squared minus 1, which means I'm dividing each of these by a squared minus 1. And then what is still left over for my second parenthesis?
A minus c.
A minus c. Okay? And the y is still in front, but I already wrote it here, but if you want to write it here in front, you can too. And then we always check if we can factor further. Can either one of those parentheses be factored any further?
Yes.
Yes, because when you have an a squared term and a minus, check to see if you can make this number a square. Can I make 1 a square?
Yes.
Yes, because 1 times 1 is still 1. So this factors end up being a minus 1 and a plus 1, and then you still have your a minus c. And I can't go any further, so that's my final answer. Does it matter the order of your parentheses? No. All right, questions on 8. Okay, number 9. I noticed number 9, I see cubes. So I want to check to see if everything is a cube. Can we write 125 as a cube? What is it? Good. So 125 is 5 cubed, and then you have x cubed minus y cubed. We need to first write everything as cubes. After you do that, you know that your first parenthesis is exactly what's there, but without the cubes. So that means my first parenthesis is going to be what? 5x minus y. Are we all okay with that? Okay, my second parenthesis, what goes in the front? How do I figure out what goes in the front there?
You take the first term and square it.
You take that first term and you square it. Do I just square the x? No, we square everything. So what is 5 squared? 25. And then it's going to be x squared. Okay. I'm going to go to the last term. What is my last term going to be?
The last term.
It'll always be positive, and then we square the last term. So what is that?
Y squared.
Y squared. So the first term in the parenthesis is the first term of this parenthesis squared, and the last term in this parenthesis is the last term squared. Anytime you square a negative, it will be a positive. Okay, who remembers how to find the middle term?
You just combine the
Very good. We just combine them. We multiply these together. What is 5x times y? 5xy, but we always take the opposite sign, so that means this sign will be a... You multiply both of these terms together. So 5x times y makes 5xy. And that's it. How many negatives should be in your answer? Just one. And remember, SOAP, same sign as your original problem, opposite sign of your original problem, and always positive. Okay? Do we have questions on number 9? No? Okay. All right. Number 10. Whenever you have parentheses like this in your problem and they're asking you to factor, it's a good idea to do your substitution where we say let z equal x plus 5. So that means I end up writing this as z squared minus y squared. Can you factor z squared minus y squared? What does it factor to be? Okay, z plus y and z minus y. Okay, can I factor that any further? No. So once you factored as far as you can, we plug it in. Very good. So that means x plus y, since that's what z represents, we're plugging that in for z into both of our parentheses. So I end up with x plus 5 plus y and x plus 5 minus y. Yes?
For instance, if y was a number, would we add the 5 and the
Yes.
y?
So within your parentheses, you always want to check, are there like terms I can combine within my parentheses? Could I factor it further within my parentheses? So always check that. Yes. Okay, other questions on number 10? Number 11. What will I do for number 11?
treat the x minus y as z. Let it be z.
Very good. So let z equal x minus y. So we rewrite this problem, z squared minus 5z minus 14. What numbers multiply to be 14?
7 and 2.
Good, 1 and 14 and 2 and 7. Okay, which one can make 5?
7 and 2.
Good, and which one would need to be negative?
7.
7 would need to be negative. Okay, so those multiply to be negative 14 and they add to be negative 5. So when we factor this, I have z plus 2 and z minus 7.
Isn't that kind of like the over beginning of bottoms up kind of, right? You have to like do that.
Yes, but bottoms up over under is only if you have a number in front here and we don't.
I mean,
Yeah, so it's just your factoring. Okay? So it's like your diamond method.
yeah.
Okay. All right, can I factor those any further? No. So then all I need to do is substitute back in x minus 1 in for z. So we get x minus 1 plus 2 and x minus 1 minus 7. And this brings up what Susanna was asking in terms of would we combine our like terms now? So within those parentheses, since we have two numbers, we would combine those terms. So this first parenthesis is going to end up being what? Good, x plus 1. And the second parenthesis is going to be x minus 8. And I can't factor those further. That is my answer. Yes?
On number 2, how do you know whether or not
Number 2 in the group. Number 10. Because it's asking you to factor, you're going to do the z. If it had said multiply, then you would do the box. Okay? So yeah, so you want to pay attention to the instructions. You'll also notice, like, for a lot of these, there are multiple choice questions on your test, and so you'll see that your answers, like, are in parentheses and stuff, so that should also be a clue that you would do the z. Okay? All right, other questions? Okay, number 12 is asking you to find the volume. How do you find volume?
Box method.
Your box method. Volume is length times width times height. So that means you're multiplying 3 things together. We are not able to multiply 3 things together at the same time, though. So we multiply 2 things together, get the answer, and then take the third thing and multiply it with that answer from the 2. So which 2 would you like to multiply together first? Okay, so we'll multiply these 2 together. Does it matter which 2 we multiply together? No. Okay. So I'm going to make a 2 by 2 box because I have 2 terms by 2 terms. It doesn't matter where you put these. I'm going to put x and negative 2 on top and 3x and negative 5 on the bottom. If you did the opposite, that is okay. So when I multiply this, 3x times x is 3x squared. 3x times negative 2 is negative 6x. Negative 5 times x is negative 5x. And negative 5 times negative 2 makes a positive 10. Again, always be very careful with your signs. Both of those are negative, which means I will add them and it stays negative. So it's negative 11x and then plus 10. So there's my answer to the multiplication of the first 2 terms. Now I need to also multiply this. So I'm taking this answer and we still need to multiply it by 2x plus 1. So what size box would I need for this?
3 by 2.
Good. 3 by 2. Yes, Danny. What are these? Oh, yes. Okay, so obviously the 3 terms would go on top. So we have 3x squared minus 11x and a positive 10. And on the side we have 2x and 1. So 2x times 3x squared is 6x to the third.
Yeah.
Okay, 2x and negative 11x is negative 22x squared. 2x times 10 is 20x. 1 times 3x squared is 3x squared. 1 times negative 11x is negative 11x. And 1 times 10 is 10. Okay, my like terms are in my diagonals. And so all we're doing is combining our like terms. So my answer, we start in descending order, is 6x to the third. A positive 3x and a negative 22 makes what? Good. Negative 19x squared. 20 and negative 11 makes a positive 9x, and then you have plus 10. And that is your answer. Questions? Okay, does anybody still need this up here? All right, moving on. 13. Okay, this one tells you that the volume, they're telling you basically that the answer is this. Okay? Then they're asking you, it says if the height is 2x squared units, what are the length and the width? So basically, they want you to bring this back to the 3 different terms. Okay, they're telling you this is one of the 3. So what we have to do first is divide everything by 2x squared. So I'm going to rewrite this out. 4x to the 4th plus 26x to the 3rd plus 30x squared. And we're dividing everything by 2x squared. Okay, when I do that, 4 divided by 2 makes 2, and x to the 4th divided by x squared makes x squared. Plus 26 divided by 2 makes 13, and x squared divided by x to the 3rd makes just an x. Plus 30 divided by 2 makes 15, and the x squareds cancel out. Okay. Are we all okay at that step? Okay, so now we have this. Well, in order to separate that into two terms, we have to factor it. Okay, so in order to factor this, what will I do? Good, your over under bottoms up method. So we go over by 2. We get x squared plus 13x plus, and 2 times 15 makes 30. What numbers will multiply to be 30 and add to be 13? 10 and 3. So we get x plus 10 and x plus 3. What you have to be careful about is that anytime you go over, you also need to go under and reduce. Can 10 divided by 2 reduce? What does that reduce to? X plus 5. Can 3 over 2 reduce? No. So anytime they don't reduce, you bring your bottoms up in front of that x. So that makes 2x plus 3. How can I double check that I did this correctly? You can multiply this out, do your box method, or check your first two terms. 2x times x should make your 2x squared. 5 times 3 should make your 15. These should multiply to make your front term and your last term. Okay, and so these are your length and width. Questions on 13? Okay? No? No? Meaning no questions, or you're not good? Okay. All right. Okay. 14 is the exact same thing. It's just written differently in terms of your terms. So this is my original equation, and I have to divide everything by 27. So we take 27 minus 27y to the third. We're going to divide out our height. So we divide each of these by 27. 27 divided by 27 makes a 1. Don't forget that 1. These 27s cancel out, and we are just left with y to the third. Since we have y to the third, that means, can I write 1 as a third power? Yes. 1 to the third is still 1, right? 1 times 1 times 1 is still 1. So this is a cube factoring. So when I factor this, what is my first parenthesis going to be? 1 minus y. Okay, so we just take off the third powers, and we have 1 minus y. My second parenthesis. The first term is the first term squared. So what do I end up with? 1. My last term is the last term squared, which is what?
Y squared.
And is it going to be positive or negative?
Positive.
Always positive. My middle term, we multiply these together. What is 1 times y? 1y. And will it be minus or plus? Plus, because it's always the opposite. And you can write 1y or just y. Either means the same. And so now you have your two parentheses, which represent the length and the width. So that is my answer. Questions on 14? Okay. 15, long division. Who remembers what we're always looking at first?
First.
Your first terms. I'm looking at x and x squared. X times what makes x squared? X. I don't know what you mean by that. Look at your first two terms.
Yeah.
Okay. That is x. That's what I put here. So then you have to multiply x to both of these. X times x is x squared. X times 2 is
2x.
okay? I don't know how to write all this out. I'll try to figure it out for you later, Amber, okay? Okay, and then once we do that, what do I do? Change your signs, because we have to subtract. So both of these signs change. Since they're both positives, they will both become negatives. Okay? These cancel. What is 3x minus 2x? 1x. And then you always need to bring down your next term. In this case, it's negative 4. There are no more terms for me to bring down, and so this is going to be my last step. Okay? So now I'm looking at my first term here and my first term here. X times what makes x? 1. Is that positive or negative?
Positive.
positive 1. And we take this and multiply it to both our terms over here. 1 times x is 1x or x. 1 times 2 is 2. And then I need to change my signs. Both of these become negatives. These cancel. And negative 4 and negative 2 makes what? Negative 6. It is when I multiplied it by x. So on my first row, I did x times x, which is x squared. X times 2, which is 2x. On my next one, I'm multiplying by 1. And 1 times x is x. 1 times x is x. 1 times 2 is 2. So we have x plus 1, and then we go plus, and whatever my remainder is, which is negative 6, we divide that by whatever I was dividing by, which is x plus 2. And that's your answer. Okay, 16, this is a review from last unit, but you need to know how to do it. There is a test question. First of all, this is a less than sign, which means it's an and statement. Okay, 2x plus 3 is less than 19, and 2x plus 3 is greater than negative 19. Okay, once your absolute value is by itself, you make your two different statements. Here I subtract 3 to both sides. 2x is less than 16, divide by 2, and I get x is less than 8. Over here, I subtract 3 to both sides. 2x is greater than negative 22, divide by 2, and I get x is greater than negative 11. So I go over here to my graph. Negative 11 is on the left, positive 8 is on the right. At negative 11, it's open going right. At 8, it's open going left. They overlap in the middle. So when you write your answer, remember it's least to greatest. Negative 11 is less than x is less than 8. Keeping your less than and sign in the middle. Okay, I'm going kind of fast to make sure we get through this. Okay, on 17. This has a negative exponent outside the parentheses, so I take that whole parenthesis, bring it to the bottom. This parenthesis right here has a negative exponent. I'm going to take that and move it up to the top. So I'm going to rewrite this. I have 2xy to the negative third to the second. Also going to the top is this xy to the negative 2. So I have xy, but that becomes positive 2. On the bottom, I still have the 2 that's in front. And then I brought down the 5x to the negative second, y to the fourth. Since this changed from negative 1 to positive 1, I don't have to write the positive 1, but you could if you wanted to. Yes?
Why did you, I know you put the 5x squared, the negative squared thing on the bottom because of negative 1.
Yes.
But shouldn't negative 2 still be on?
No.
Do you have to bring it back up? Because like,
We'll end up bringing it back up once I simplify all my parentheses. But right now, I'm just taking care of the negative exponents on the outside, and so you move the whole parenthesis, leave it exactly like it is when you move it. Okay? And then we'll end up having to move things twice. Okay, this 2 goes through to every term. 2 squared is 4, and then we get x squared, and we get y to the negative 6. Okay? Then this square goes to everything in here, and I get an x squared and a y squared. On the bottom, there's nothing to distribute through, but I can multiply 5 times 2 together, or yeah, 2 times 5, and I get 10, x to the negative 2, y to the fourth. Okay, now before I move anything, I would combine, like all my x's and y's, if they can be combined on the top, because there's multiple, we'll put them together. So on the top now, I'm going to have 4, and since I have x squared and x squared, that's going to make x to the fourth. I have y to the negative 6 and y to the second, which will make y to the negative 4. Good. Negative 6 and positive 2 makes negative 4. And then I still have 10, x to the negative 2, y to the fourth on the bottom. So now we're going to move our exponents. This negative 2 is going to get brought up. This negative 4 is going to be brought down. Can 4 and 10 reduce? Bless you. Yes. So they reduce by 2, so we get 2 and 5. So I end up with, on the top, 2, and it's going to be x to what power? 6, because we already have 4 there, and we're bringing 2 more up, so that makes x to the 6th. My denominator, I have 5. I already have y to the 4th in the bottom, but I bring 4 more down, which will make y to the 8th. Okay? And I can't reduce anymore, so that's my answer. Questions on 17?
So, okay.
Yes.
That thing's still value, so you had to move the first bottom term, you had to move back up because if you're moving something down, you can't have like two, do something down,
Right.
Okay.
You can only do one thing at a time. Okay, 18, I have to go quick. You can write a 4th power as a square. So I have a squared to the 2nd minus, and then I'm going to have b squared to the 2nd. Okay? So that is now a difference of squares. I get a squared minus b squared and a squared plus b squared. I'm separating the squares, so I'm separating the 4, which would make 2 and 2. If you look, this is still a difference of squares. A squared minus b squared. This is not a difference of squares, it's a plus. So this can be factored, this one right here, to be a minus b, a plus b, and then this one can't be factored, so I just write it as a squared plus b squared. And that is my answer. They cannot be factored any further from that point. Okay, 19, we're going to do z again. Let z equal 7x plus 5. We get z squared plus 8z minus 20. The numbers that work are 2 and 10 would be positive, 2 would be negative. We get z minus 2 and z plus 10. It cannot be factored further, so we're plugging back in our z value. When I do that, I get 7x plus 5 minus 2 and 7x plus 5 plus 10. Since I have two numbers that can combine, my answer ends up being 7x plus 3 and 7x plus 15. Okay, last one, number 20. It is up to you, but I suggest always checking for descending order. I did. This is going to be x squared plus 0x minus 3. I'm writing my 0x for my descending order, and then x cubed minus x squared minus 3x plus 3. Okay, looking at my first two terms, x squared and x cubed. What do I do to x squared to make it x cubed? X. I'm lining it up with my x term right here. We have to take this and multiply it to all three terms. X times x squared is x to the third. X times 0x is 0x squared. X times negative 3 is negative 3x. And then we change our signs. This is minus, minus, and a plus. The x cubes cancel. Negative x squared and 0x squared makes negative x squared. 3x and negative 3x cancel out, and you have a 0x, and then we bring down our plus 3. We keep our descending order. Okay, so now I'm looking at these front two terms. What do I multiply x squared by to make it negative x squared? Negative 1. Negative 1 times x squared is negative x squared. Negative 1 times 0 is a negative 0x or positive 0x, doesn't matter. Negative 1 times negative 3 makes a positive 3, but we change all our signs. This becomes a plus, plus, minus. Cancels. 0 and 0 is nothing. 3 and negative 3 cancels. There is no remainder, which means that your answer is just x minus 1.